Chapter 4, Violet and the Pie of Life. What was missing the next morning? Dad's shaving cream. His great smelling cologne that Mom said was a rich person's cologne, and we weren't rich. Beer from the fridge. The beat up leather armchair. Dad's laptop, usually on the coffee table. All Dad's shoes from the hallway. And Dad. Just standing in the hallway and seeing the floor without his shoes made me want to cry. I must have been staring down too long because Mom said, "Are you okay?" with the same pitying voice from last night. I held back tears and made my face hard, and then I pointed to the floor. Happy now? You don't have to tell Dad to pick up his shoes anymore. No, Violet, I'm not happy. It's going to be hard for both of us. I glared at her. What did she mean for both of us? Me and her, Dad and her? What about all three of us? What had happened to that? On the way to school, Mom talked about her new real estate listing and the fall leaves and other fascinating stuff while I stared out the car window at the gloomy fog. The plan I made yesterday, pretending to be in the hospital, was Swiss cheesy with holes. Did you hear me, Violet? Mom asked. Huh? I turned my head toward her. When I asked when the school play is, a couple of months from now. The play, it wasn't like a giant light bulb suddenly lit up. It wasn't like a giant light bulb suddenly lit up in my brain, more like a sequence of little light bulbs that made my brain brighter and brighter. One light bulb turned on, it lit up the next one, and so on until I saw the light. If I got a part, both my parents would come to watch me. When they saw me on stage, they'd smile. Their eyes would meet. They'd reignite a spark. Having just two of them sitting next to each other would turn their spark into a flame. I'd come off stage to find them arm in arm. It would be very romantic. And my parents would be reunited and in love with each other again. Look, Violet. Mom pointed as she drove past a house even tinier than ours. That was my first sale ever. Now the paint is peeling and the yard needs sprucing up. If she talked about her real estate listings to Dad in the auditorium, she'd never reignite a spark. She'd probably put him to sleep. Once we got to my school, I asked Mom, "Can you pick me up today at 5:30? 5:30? Why are you staying?" Callbacks, I opened the door. You got a callback? That's great, Violet, she said as I got out of the car. So you can pick me up? Of course, I closed the door behind me. Pie. Audition advice from Mackenzie during lunch. Stand tall like Mr. Goldstein told you before. If he criticizes your singing, tell him you're usually a lot better, but you have a cold. Be aware of Allie's sweet act. I stood by the back door of the near-empty auditorium for a minute, looking around, wondering why I'd been put on the callback list. The other kids had given fantastic auditions. Allie, for instance, and Henry Thomasil, who looks like what would happen if Harry Styles and Liam Hemsworth had a baby, and Sarah Blanchett, who always got solos in choir. But Diego Ortiz had gotten a callback too after playing the Tin Man like he was doing a comedy routine. Untalented people, people who made callbacks, talented people. Oh, Venn diagram. So untalented people was Violet and Diego. People who made callbacks are in this circle. And these are the talented people in this circle. Mackenzie didn't get a callback yet. I wonder where to sit. Sarah Blanchett stood behind the last row of chairs, doing weird voice exercises. Like she was at the dentist. And then, like she was a Martian. I couldn't wait to imitate her for Mackenzie. Mame Glassman paced up and down the left aisle, muttering, "You got this, you got this, you got this." I slowly headed down the middle aisle. I felt kind of scary to do stuff without Mackenzie. I wasn't used to it. We'd been best friends since she joined my Girl Scout troop at the start of 4th grade. First, we had a circle of friends, my circle, really, made up of the girls who'd been in my Brownie group troop and then moved on to junior Girl Scouts together. But Mackenzie and I both quit at the end of 4th grade. As Mackenzie pointed out when she was convincing me to quit, there's no reason to earn badges. It's not like earning money. It's only a piece of cloth for your mom to sew onto your sash. Well, for Mackenzie's mom to glue onto her sash. And after half the glue stopped sticking, for my mom to sew on the patches on for Mackenzie. Also, Mackenzie said the sash made us look like dorks pretending to be beauty queens. She thought the whole uniform was silly. Anyway, quitting Girl Scouts made me spiral out of my circle of friends, which was fine because I had Mackenzie. I had Mackenzie spiraling right next to me. Later, the kids I'd gone through elementary school with split into different middle schools. I watched them spiral and scramble to make new friends while I clung safe and tight to my friendship with Mackenzie. Having only one real friend wasn't fine now. Walking through the auditorium, barely knowing any of the people I passed. "Hey, Violet," Allie said. She was sitting on my right. I froze. She smiled and patted the seat next to hers. When the door opened and Diego walked in, he stood at the entrance and said in a loud, high voice, "Here I am, your Dorothy." Everyone laughed. My laugh surprised me. I hadn't laughed or even maybe smiled since I saw the U-Haul truck yesterday. Diego rushed down the aisle behind me, calling out, "I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore." Before he could mow me down, I took a seat next to Allie. She looked towards the back of the auditorium and whispered, "I didn't know Mackenzie got a call back." I turned around. Mackenzie stood at the entrance with her arms crossed, staring at me. Her gaze flittered to Allie and then back to me. I bit my lip and gave Mackenzie a big, dumb shrug, as if I had no idea how I ended up there, as if being unconscious, and the next thing I knew was at this callback, Mackenzie. Mackenzie had wanted, oh, that's wrong. I was at this callback Mackenzie had wanted. Sitting in a 3,000 square foot auditorium right beside Mackenzie's mortal enemy, who was supposed to be my mortal enemy too. Mackenzie shook her head. I didn't know what to do. I wished I could build a machine and travel back in time to choose a different seat in the auditorium. Or I could go further back and skip the audition, or go way back and tell Mackenzie to trust me, even if she saw me years later sitting next to her worst enemy. To work out what to do, I did a flow chart in my head. Smile at Mackenzie and gesture her over. Mackenzie wouldn't like being bossed around. Mackenzie would get even madder. Text Mackenzie to explain why I sat next to Allie. Mackenzie would realize I wasn't exactly forced to sit next to Allie, and Mackenzie would get even madder. Walk over to Mackenzie and talk to her. She'd probably leave before I got there. Mackenzie would still be mad, and I'd be embarrassed. Do something amazing. Mackenzie would be happy, and everything would be solved. Unfortunately, I couldn't think of anything amazing that would make Mackenzie happy and solve everything. So I turned away from her. When I heard the audience door close, I sighed with relief. You nervous? Asked Allie. Allie whispered. I nodded. Me too, Allie said, as if we had so much in common. But we didn't have anything in common. It made sense that Allie got a call back. She was a beautiful, popular girl who probably had beautiful, popular parents and a beautiful house that was probably so popular Allie's family bought it in a bidding war. Of course, with Allie's perfect life, she was guaranteed to make callbacks. But it was a total, I'm getting tired. But it was a total surprise that I did. And I had other things to be nervous about. Mackenzie seeing me with Allie, my dad leaving, the real possibility that I'd start crying at any moment. Allie was probably nervous that she'd get the good witch or the scarecrow part instead of Dorothy. You tell him, Trip. Zemo's getting too close. The real possibility I'd start crying at any moment. Allie was probably nervous that she'd get the good witch or the scarecrow part instead of Dorothy. When the back door opened again, I didn't turn around. What if Mackenzie had returned? I was a wimp. But it was Mr. Goldstein. He hurried to the front of the auditorium and began talking. Do you understand the theme of the Wizard of Oz? Duh, there's no place like a home. I pictured my home this morning, its missing leather armchair, the bare hardwood floor. My mom wasn't even like home anymore. Sarah Blanchett raised her hand to answer Mr. Goldstein's question. I knew the right answer, but I wasn't a fan of being stared at. The theme of the movie is There's No Place Like Home. Mr. Goldstein said, but remember, we're performing the play. Sarah put her hand down. I was so glad I hadn't raised my hand. An appreciation of the theme of The Wizard of Oz will help inform your auditions, Mr. Goldstein said. Next to me, Allie started to yawn. She covered her mouth and tried to stop it, but it made a little quacking noise. I yawned too. I looked around to see if anyone else had heard Miss Perfect quack. Diego was grinning and staring at Allie. I bet he heard. I glanced back at Allie. Her cheeks were pink, and she looked like I would if I'd made that embarrassing noise, except prettier. Mr. Goldstein kept going. Dorothy is trapped on a farm in Kansas. The scarecrow is tied up, literally, and the Tin Man cannot move, and the lion is paralyzed with fear. They each yearn to discover what they have deep inside them to propel their lives themselves down the yellow brick road of life. Allie yawned and quacked again, louder this time. A few kids stared at her, and she turned bright red. Too bad. Oh, Mackenzie wasn't around to hear that. She would have loved it. Mr. Goldstein frowned and said, anyone willing to take this audition seriously, anyone unwilling to take this audition seriously should leave right now. I actually felt sorry for Allie for the first time ever. I changed my mind about telling Mackenzie about her yawn quacks just because now it just seemed cruel. Mr. Goldstein connected the speakers to his phone and played Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and then he had us listen to the Scarecrows, the Tin Mans, and the Lions songs. Allie went on stage first and sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow beautifully. I was glad Mackenzie wasn't around to hear that. Then, when it was my turn, Mr. Goldstein handed me a sheet of paper with lyrics to the Lion song in big, bold font. Mackenzie had said she wanted to play the lion if she couldn't be Dorothy. It would be a disaster if I got the part instead. I opened my mouth. but nothing came out. I didn't have the nerve to sing. If only I had the nerve. Do you want to be here, Violet? Mr. Goldstein asked. I nodded. I wanted to be here more than I wanted to be home with my fake, cheery mother and missing father and whirling brain. Really want to be here, Mr. Goldstein said. Remember the theme. You're yearning, Violet. Yearning. I closed my eyes and thought hard about it. I didn't really want to be here, and not just to get out of my house and my head. I wanted to feel the joy and satisfaction I had yesterday on stage, and off stage too. As I walked past the other kids, I, Violet Summers, had been noticed for something positive. I liked it. I wanted it. I wanted it to happen again. But I wanted more than anything was for my parents to sit together, watch me perform, smile at each other, and realize they should get back together. Ah, the author changed the name Goldstein, Mr. Goldstein. And it says here, Mr. Goldberg, I really want to be here. Sometimes even authors make mistakes. I said, Mr. Goldberg, I really want to be here, I said. She yearns to be here, Diego said. A few kids giggled. I opened my mouth and sang the first words on the song sheet. I thought about my dad, his long, funny stories, his loud, easy laughter. I yearned for him. I sang and I yearned. When I got toward the end, I pictured Dad walking through the front door, kicking off his shoes and throwing his arm around Mom like I remembered him doing when I was little. Dad would call out, Vi, get in here, and we'd have a family hug. As I sang, I stretched my own arms wide and then hugged myself. Afterward, Mr. Goldstein smiled and said, Splendid! When I got back to my seat, Allie patted my arm and said, Awesome! Thank you, I murmured. I didn't want to come off as conceited, so I didn't add, I know I was awesome. But I did know that. We'll save chapter 5 for another time.